Hi, I'm Jaclyn.
And I'm Courtney, and this is Caffeinated Crimes.
Welcome to what's going to be a very sad episode, so we're going to apologize in advance. This one has been on our list since the very beginning because it is a hometown one. We have had it requested multiple times, so we did finally decide to go ahead and do it. But it's a rough one, so I'm sorry, putting that out there ahead of time.
Yeah, I'd say this is probably our most highly requested. Anytime I really talk to anyone, they're like, you should do this case. Have you done this case? Because no podcasts really do this case. I've only seen one, and it was kind of weird. It wasn't really like telling the story like traditionally. They were like interviewing one of the guys in prison. So I don't know. It was weird.
Yeah.
And we're just going to start off keeping it depressed. So we only have one like real bit of like true crime news that just happened last night at the Washington Nationals and San Diego Padres game. There was a shooting right outside the game. And like literally right outside, like you could hear it in the stadium, the gunshots. I watched a few videos. It was terrifying. What I just saw looked like there were two vehicles that were shooting at each other. There was a woman struck. It looks like she was outside the stadium. So it looked like she was a bystander who did get struck. And then later, two of the victims from one car came to the hospital with their injuries. So they're still looking for that second car. Thankfully, it wasn't necessarily like an active shooter in the stadium, but still super terrifying. Did you hear what happened with the All-Star game by chance?
No.
So a few days before the All-Star game in Colorado, a maid found in someone's hotel room like a shit ton of weapons, a shit ton of ammunition. It kind of looked like a Las Vegas, the concert scenario all over again.
Yeah.
So they found that. So it's like a lot of stuff happening right there. But, I mean, thankfully, it doesn't seem like anyone died from this current shooting and that everyone is okay. But it just sucks because you're just trying to go to places. And now you have to, like, deal with this on top of it. So...
And I think, too, especially right now, I think so many people have, like, general social anxiety going back into crowds, like, COVID-wise. Like, it's been so long since people have been to places like this, and then now you have this added on top, and it's just like, can I ever feel safe going anywhere, you know?
Yeah, and I do know from the Padres, it was Manny Machado, Fernando Tatis Jr., and Will Myers. Kind of conflicting reports. Some people say they were grabbing their families. Even if they were, they still... like opened locked gates to let fans run into the dugout before anyone knew what was happening. And so a lot of people are talking about that on Twitter. Like they weren't even, in their home stadium, but they're still like, come on, like everyone get down here. Like we'll help everybody. The Nationals did it too, but it's just like such a terrifying like moment.
Yeah, definitely. So since we said today is going to be rough, I'm just going to tell you guys a fun story. Not really fun, interesting, I don't know. Just bear with me if you guys want a little bit of lighter banter before the really depressing stuff. Just hang out with us for a minute. If you just want to jump straight to the depressing, just skip a couple minutes. But, so today is Sunday as we are recording this, and Courtney and I plan to record at like 2 o'clock. And at like 12:45, when my husband finally got out of bed, he asked if I wanted to go grab coffee and lunch. And I'm like, okay. And then, of course, my daughter gets hungry. So I'm like, okay, let me feed her really quickly. So I text Courtney and I'm like, all right, I should be like just after 2 o'clock. Like, I don't want to hold you up. Like, hopefully, So she's like, no, you're good. We'll be there right at 2, a little after 2, whatever. So we go to downtown Petersburg, which is pretty close by, and the coffee shop that we were going to go to was closed, and then the bakery that we were going to go to was closed, and then I noticed that the barbecue place that's right there is closed, and I'm like, why is everything closed? Like, all these places are open on Sundays, so it's not like it's, so I have no idea. I still don't know why all of those places are closed. I tried to Google it. There's a drag show down there tonight, but I don't know why they would need to, like, shut everything down unless... everyone's participating. I don't know, but they all had signs on the door, but we like just drove by. We didn't stop and get out since we saw that they were closed. So I'm sure the signs would have told us, but we were also trying to be mindful of the time. So then we're like, okay, we'll just go to Starbucks and get a sandwich and coffees and, whatever. So I put in my mobile order, and then we get to Starbucks, and Andrew runs in, and then he comes out, and he's like, they don't have your sandwich. And apparently when he like went in there to get our orders, they're like, oh, we don't have your sandwich, we can give you another one. And then she just like walked away. Andrew's like, okay, so like, what sandwiches do you have? Like, and then they only had like breakfast sandwiches. So then he came out and I was like, yeah, I don't want any of those. So then he had to go in and get a refund in our coffees. And then I was like, well, at this point, I should have just ate at home, but I also would rather eat on the way home so that I'm not like holding Courtney up when we get home. So I'm like, we'll just stop at Wendy's. And then there's a sign, and like we see all these cars pulling away from Wendy's. Like they like go up to the thing and then they leave, and I'm like, okay, what the hell is wrong with Wendy's? And then apparently they're only accepting cash, and I'm like, okay. So I look at my wallet and I have $5. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'm gonna get a 4 for $4. So I got a chicken sandwich and some fries and chicken nuggets, and they did not give me my barbecue sauce. So I had to wait until I got home to eat those because, let's be real, chicken nuggets are just a vessel for barbecue sauce. I don't really care that much about the nuggets. I just want an excuse to eat barbecue sauce because I would put it on pretty much anything. But I was only 8 minutes late to recording, so that's my story. You're welcome.
You got it all done. I know a few places by us just for the month of like July have been closing on the weekends. They're like, we're just going to give our employees like some weekends off or some days off, you know.
Yeah.
Especially I know a lot of places are getting like short staffed too. So they're like, we'll just close on a day that we're normally open for this time. So
yeah, I have seen like other places around here that like random, like Courtney and I tried to go get Froyo and it was closed, and you know, things like that they're closing at kind of random times because they are short staffed. But it was so weird to me that like 3 places like right there together were all closed. So I'm like, and they're not like owned by the same person or anything. They just are close to each other. So I don't know.
They're all best friends and just took a vacation together. They were like, we're
Maybe
not going to
so.
come in today.
I hope they're enjoying their vacation if so. But now that we have told you this long, unnecessary story, just to, you know, not have an entirely depressing episode, I think it's time to get into this highly requested one.
Yeah, so if you don't like the depressing stuff, you can just zoom on forward to the perk of the week. I'll try to keep it light. So this one is, like we said, very highly requested, and we will just say we go into as much detail as we saw fit. So it is, I'll try to remember maybe to like give a warning before I go into detail on certain things, just so if it is a lot, you can go forward. But a lot of this first half is very heavy, so just kind of want to give a trigger warning. It's kind of weird, but a trigger warning basically.
Yes.
So for sources, we used a bunch of articles from knoxnews.com, a WVLT article, good old Wikipedia because it is a great resource to find other sources, the Kingsport Time News article, and there was an episode of Sins and Secrets. It was episode 1. We did watch that. So residents of Knoxville, Tennessee will always remember January 6, 2007 as the day of the most infamous and brutal crime to occur in the city. And the names of both the victims and perpetrators are well known and continue to be remembered today. So in January 2007, Lamarcus Davidson of Knoxville, Tennessee was on parole for carjacking and was a suspect in several robberies. So he'd only been out of prison for a few months and was a known drug dealer in the area. So his brother, Latavius Cobbins, and his friend George Thomas and girlfriend Vanessa Coleman had come to visit him from Kentucky. So Cobbins and Thomas were both homeless, and none of the 4 individuals had a job, a car, or any money. We're off to a great start.
Yes, just what you need.
Davidson was known to sell drugs, but he wasn't able to do that without a car. So he became increasingly angry at his brother and his friends for staying in his house and not contributing, and he did begin to take that anger out on his girlfriend, Daphne Sutton. So she did break up with him on January 5th, and this only made him even angrier, and he decided that he would just carjack someone with his brother and another friend named Eric Boyd. And Cobbins claimed that he didn't like the idea and said Davidson said he was going to steal a car and try to get some money. 21-year-old Channon Christensen and 23-year-old Christopher Newsom were planning on attending a friend's party on the night of January 6, 2007. So Channon had graduated from Farragut High School and was a senior at the University of Tennessee, and she was majoring in sociology. And she was working 2 part-time jobs in addition to being a full-time student. So Christopher had graduated from Halls High School, where he played baseball, and he attended Pellissippi State Community College and was working as a carpenter. So in addition to baseball, he loved golf, tennis, and fishing. Channon also loved golf and had followed in her father and brother's footsteps when it came to enjoying the sport. So they had started dating in November of 2006, and they were very much in love with each other. Both Channon and Christopher still lived with their parents, and Channon had been hanging out with her friend Kara at their apartment on the night of January 6th. Christopher was supposed to pick her up and take her to the party that they would all eventually be attending. So he called around 7:30 p.m. and said he was running a bit late and he'd be there in about a half an hour. And Channon told Kara, like, go ahead, go to the party. I'll meet you there once Christopher gets here. But Channon and Christopher never arrived at that party. So Channon and Christopher were in the parking lot of the Washington Ridge Apartments where Kara lived when Davidson, Cobbins, and Boyd approached in a car driven by Boyd. He had borrowed this car from his cousin. And Channon was sitting in the driver's seat of her Toyota 4Runner while Christopher stood outside the vehicle talking to her. And Boyd and Davidson jumped out of the car with guns. So they later said they only intended to carjack them, but they saw headlights and got scared, so they just pushed them into Shannon's car. And they did bind Channon and Christopher with cords from inside her vehicle, and they pushed Christopher down on the floor and placed Channon on top of him. And Davidson drove the car back to his house on Chipman Street, with Boyd following behind in the borrowed car.
I think that's one thing that makes this case so terrifying is that they're just literally doing something that we've all done, you know, like you're just hanging outside with your boyfriend, like about to go to a party, or just like chilling in your car as you're getting ready to leave, and then you're literally just ambushed and kidnapped. Like,
yeah, I saw, it was like an interview with her dad just being like, think of like how fast that happens, you know, like you're just getting in the car, you're just talking for a second, and then suddenly there's men with guns pointing at you, like, happens so quickly. And yeah, it is so random, which I think is really kind of what shook Knoxville, is it's like, wow, this could just be anybody, anywhere, anytime. So Vanessa Coleman and George Thomas were at the house when they arrived with Channon and Christopher, and so they all got into an argument because Davidson and Thomas didn't really know each other that well. And so Davidson is like telling him, like, I need you to do something, like, for me to be able to trust you. Like, you got to be a part of this so that I know you're not going to, like, go and tell people. And they told Channon they would let her go if she did what they said. And they even had her call home at gunpoint so that her family wouldn't be suspicious. Which is just, like, I can't imagine.
But then it's like you don't even have that heads up of, like, something's wrong because I haven't heard from her in so many hours, because it's like, oh, I talked to her and she said everything was fine, you know?
Yeah, and that's the thing, too, just being like, if you had just been kidnapped, too, and having to, like, hear your family's voice and, like, try and hold it together to be like, I'm okay, because you think, like, okay, if I just do this, I'll get to see them, you know, just how horrifying that must be.
Yeah.
So, as I said, I would give a little heads up. We are going to kind of start to discuss what happens after for the next few minutes. So just a heads up, if you really don't want to hear it, please skip forward. So evidence suggests the four men then forced Christopher in the rear cargo compartment of the 4Runner. And at some point, Christopher was raped and sodomized by at least one of the men. It's never been confirmed, but it is highly suspected that it was Eric Boyd who raped Christopher. And it's unclear whether he was raped in the SUV or in the house. So they took Christopher to some nearby railroad tracks where they forced him to walk on the tracks barefoot. And a dog leash was later found, and they do believe that they used that to force Christopher in that direction. Davidson then forced Thomas to shoot Christopher. The first shot hit him in the neck, and as he fell forward, Thomas shot him again in the back. Then Davidson fatally shot him in the head, and a witness would later describe hearing gunshots in that direction around 1:45 a.m. So after they returned to the house on Chipman Street, Boyd left, and Davidson and Thomas took off their bloody clothes to wash them, and then they left with a comforter and a gas can to burn Christopher's body, and they left his body on the railroad tracks and abandoned the 4Runner nearby. Cobbins then went into Davidson's bedroom where Channon was tied up with Coleman. So Cobbins promised Channon he would let her go if she'd perform oral sex. He then violently orally raped her, before raping her both vaginally and anally. Channon was then brutally beaten in the vaginal area, and it is believed that Coleman is the one who participated in this beating. And at some point, at least one of the perpetrators beat Channon on the head too. She had suffered severe bleeding both vaginally and from her head. Coleman said they made her go back into the bedroom, and Davidson and Thomas dragged Channon into the living room where they poured bleach down her throat and scrubbed her bleeding wounds, possibly in an attempt to destroy DNA evidence. It didn't really work, but don't do that. Don't do that.
And we'll get into this later, like all of the evidence that they did leave behind. So I'm like, I wonder, were they even thinking of that, or was it just another way to torture her, you know?
Yeah, that's really what it seems to me. I mean,
yeah,
you clearly didn't think any of this through, so why would you think that would work?
Yeah.
Coleman said when she came back out, Channon was tied up in the fetal position with some sheets. Davidson and Cobbins then wrapped Channon in 5 trash bags and placed a grocery bag around her head, and they placed her in a trash can in the kitchen while she was still alive. Davidson then went to just go spend time with his girlfriend, while Channon was left to slowly suffocate inside the trash can. So, all of this torture, and then you just slowly suffocate. Like, how horrific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there are just no words.
Yeah.
Like,
you can see why people don't cover this case. Why it's really hard. So when Channon and Christopher did not show up at the party they were supposed to attend, their friends started calling and texting them but received no response. So they went to the Washington Ridge Apartments parking lot where they were last seen, and they did find Christopher's truck but not Shannon's SUV. So Davidson used Christopher's cell phone and wore his shoes. So bold, sir.
Yeah. Also, why? Like, why would you wear his shoes? That makes... Not that that's relevant to any of this, but it's just like, why in the hell would you choose to do that?
I feel like it's a power thing where it's like, oh, guess what? Now I'm wearing your shoes. Like, just, I don't know. Just complete... It's so fucked up. Guys, it's so fucked up. So, an employee of Waste Connections arrived on Chipman Street around 12:30 a.m. and noticed that the lights were on at 2316 Chipman Street, including the porch light, and a Toyota 4Runner was parked outside. And it kind of stood out to him because there seemed to be a lot of activity at the house for that time of night. And he said 4 men then left in the SUV and drove by him. He said they slowed down for about 20 seconds and appeared to be checking him out. Which that guy is really lucky too, because we've seen what happens. Like,
yeah,
he was very lucky that he didn't see too much, first off, but also that they didn't like view him as a threat and, you know, take him also.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shannon's family became increasingly worried as they did not hear from her and should not come home that night or show up to work the next morning. So they checked local hospitals and they attempted to file a missing persons report, but the police were not concerned about 2 young adults not speaking to their parents for 12 hours.
Courtney and I are making the face. You know. You guys know the face.
Yeah, and like, that's the thing, like, just believe people, because it's like, not just that they did not talk to their parents. Like, she didn't show up to work, and they're like, okay, like, it's kind of weird. We thought she'd be home, but she has friends. Like, she'll stay at her friend's house. You know, I lived with my parents until I was, you know, in my early 20s, and they got it. You know, I'm like, oh, hey, like, I'm not coming home tonight. Like, I'm staying out. I'm staying at this person's. Like, but if I didn't show up to work, that would be suspicious to them, because it's like, you're a no-call, no-show to your job. You don't really do that.
And also, they didn't show up to the party they were going to, so their friends haven't heard from them either. So it's like, okay, I don't think they just, like, went on a romantic getaway without telling anyone. Like, that's just, especially when the family is like, this is not like them. Like, you know your family members. You know if they are likely to do, like, there are some people, like, you know, we've talked about with, in, like, the Green River case and, you know, places like that, or people that would up and go and their parents are like, oh, I haven't talked to them in 3 months and that was normal, you know. But then you have people that they're like, no, it's not normal that I haven't heard from them. Like, that's not normal at all.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing too I saw in this one thing I was watching, where it was like, you know, it could have been possible that they, if the police had taken them seriously, they might have found Shannon. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they could have possibly hoped to intervene. You know what I mean? Like, things could have, like, moved a little quicker. Like, I think that's the thing in everyone's head of, like, well, what if they had taken us seriously? Like, could something be different or could have helped?
Yeah.
So Shannon's parents were told that if they wanted someone to search for her, they would have to do it themselves. And so that's what they did. And Shannon's family was able to get her phone provider to confirm that her phone had last pinged at a Cherry Street cell tower. So Cherry Street is kind of infamous around Knoxville. Like, you kind of know it's like a high crime area. There's a lot of drugs. There's a lot of sex workers. Like, you kind of know it's not necessarily the best place to be at night.
Mm-hmm.
And Channon was from the more affluent West Knoxville, so her parents thought it was very unusual that she would have gone to this area, especially at night. I mean, I grew up in not necessarily, affluent West Knoxville, like I was, not the best part of town necessarily, but like even I knew, like, don't find yourself there at night. Like, it's They gathered friends and family, including an off-duty police officer, and started searching around this area. And they did find her abandoned 4Runner around 1:30 to 2 a.m. on January 8th. So Shannon's car provided police with a lot of evidence. So her teddy bear, photos, phone charger, and iPod, along with stickers from the outside of the vehicle, were all missing. So it looks like everything was kind of stripped from the car to make it not as identifiable. And the front seats were pushed all the way back. So someone else had clearly driven it last, because Shannon would not have been able to reach the pedals. Channon also usually kept her car very clean, but the floorboards were covered in mud, and a pack of cigarettes were left inside the 4Runner, even though neither Channon nor Christopher smoked. So police arrived around 4 a.m. and said, okay, now we'll start searching for Channon.
Like, okay, now we believe that something might be wrong. Okay.
Oh, goodness. So Christopher's body was discovered later on January 8th at 12:20 p.m. by a Norfolk Southern Railroad employee. His body was initially identified by a homicide detective who had known him. Over 80% of his body was burned, but DNA did confirm Christopher's identity. And police were now desperate to find Channon since she was likely in danger, like her family told you how many hours ago? So Shannon's family continued to search themselves as well, and Knox County Sheriff Tim Hutchinson sent 2 helicopters in the area where Shannon's phone was last used. Meanwhile, the Knoxville Police Department processed the evidence from Shannon's vehicle. An envelope was found inside the vehicle and revealed fingerprints matching LaMarcus Davidson, who was currently on parole, and his house on Chipman Street was only 2 blocks from where Shannon's car was found. So it's like, I mean, do you need it on a silver platter or do you need it on a silver platter? So police searched the home the next day, January 9th, and discovered Shannon's body inside the trash can. And Davidson's fingerprints were also found on the trash bags and a box of trash bags inside the house. And both Davidson and Cobbin's sperm were found on Shannon's body, and Coleman's DNA was found on the sheets used to bind Shannon's hands and feet. So, like we said, there's so much evidence they left behind. Why was the bleach even necessary? The items missing from the car were found inside the house, along with shell casings that matched the bullets that had killed Christopher. And they also found a video that had been rented from a library in Kentucky in George Thomas's name. The house was empty, so now a manhunt began for LaMarcus Davidson, and the lease for the house was both in Davidson's name as well as Daphne Sutton. So police did bring her in for questioning, and she, told them, like, I just moved out of the house, we just broke up, I was not there that night, and I was sleeping with a new boyfriend. And she did provide police valuable information and said that Davidson, Cobbins, Thomas, and Coleman were at the house the night of January 6th and the morning of January 7th. And she said this group was also responsible for a string of robberies that had occurred in the area over the last few weeks, which she is very lucky she broke up with him when she did. Like, I'm hoping that she's a better person than Vanessa Coleman was and wouldn't just, go along with it. Whatever. She's very lucky she got out when she did.
Yeah.
And she told police the last time she had seen Davidson, she dropped him off at his friend Eric Boyd's house.
Yes. And cell phone records confirmed that Davidson had recently spoken with Eric Boyd, so he was then brought in for questioning as well. So he did reveal Davidson's location in a vacant house, and Davidson was arrested there on January 11th. They did find Christopher's shoes inside the house along with a .22 caliber revolver. And witnesses also reported seeing Davidson wearing Christopher's shoes, like we said, in the days before. So, again, the evidence just... You didn't get rid of anything. Like, you didn't even make any attempt to cover this up. So, during questioning, Davidson told police multiple stories. So, first he said that he was not home that night and knew nothing about these murders. Then he said that he was home that night when Cobbins and Thomas arrived around 10 p.m. and said that they carjacked a couple and they were in the vehicle. So Davidson said that he saw them, but he didn't want anything to do with that situation, so he left to smoke some weed. He says that he returned 20 minutes later, and that's where he found Channon, and she told him that she didn't want to die. He said that he then borrowed her car, to sell drugs and wiped it clean afterward. So he's like, yeah, I stole the car, but I had nothing to do with the murders. And he said he didn't go past the living room and did not have sex with Channon. But again, his sperm was on and in her body, so can't really deny that.
Yeah, how else did that get there, sir?
Yeah. So also on January 11th, Cobbins and Thomas were arrested in Lebanon, Kentucky. So they were able to track them down to this area from the DVDs that were rented from the library in the home with his name, which is crazy that that's how they were able to find them.
Thank goodness for your local libraries, y'all.
Yes, one more reason to support them, you know? So police seized a computer that showed that Cobbins and Thomas had been following the news coverage of these murders very closely. And they also seized several of Shannon's belongings that they had on them. So Cobbins said that he, Boyd, and Davidson had driven to an apartment complex to meet a girl, and then once they got there, they decided to carjack this couple. So Cobbins said that after they arrived at Davidson's house, Davidson took Channon into the bedroom, and Boyd left with Christopher and returned without him. Cobbins said that he did not have sex with Channon. Again, his sperm was also found on and in her body. So all of these people are saying, oh yes, this other person did all these things. I had nothing to do with it. That's what they're all saying.
And they keep trying to be like, oh, okay, well, I saw her. I stole the car, but I didn't do that. I didn't do that. And it's like, clearly you did.
Yeah. Like, you left your evidence all over her. What? So Coleman said that she was in the home too, but she was also being held hostage by the four men. However, they seized a journal, and she had written the night before talking about, quote, fun adventures that night. So I don't think, and I mean, obviously you can't say, oh, this is for sure what she was talking about, but if you were being held hostage, you were definitely not going to write about a fun adventure in your journal.
And even if you were like, oh, like, I felt that I was being, like, not necessarily held hostage, but like I had no choice but to go along, or, you know, they'd hurt me or something, you're not going to write in your diary about what a fun adventure that was. Like, that's not a thing.
No. And Coleman's DNA was also found on the sheets that were used to bind Shannon's hands and feet. So Boyd was served with a federal warrant on January 12th, and Coleman was then arrested on January 31st. So, like we said, all of the suspects denied involvement in the rapes and murders, despite DNA evidence proving otherwise, but they did turn on each other and provide details of what the other suspects had done. So because of Tennessee's criminal responsibility law, this actually hurt their own case because they admitted to being in the house and being aware of the crimes, but doing nothing to stop them and not reporting them after the fact. So the fact that all these people were trying to just turn on their friends really only hurt them, because it's like, yes, I was there and I witnessed all this. Okay, great, you're now responsible too. Like, even though you're claiming you had nothing to do with it, by telling us what the other people did and writing them out, you just killed your own case.
Yeah. And I think that's probably why this law, like, kind of exists too, because it's like, you are responsible to, like, try and prevent a crime, or if you can't, at least report it. Like, if you witness it, like, that's part of your responsibility, like, as a good human, to, like, report this or try to stop it. Because
that's the thing. If you were supposedly being held hostage, you weren't at the time that police found you all. So clearly, between those two times, you could have gone to the police and said something, and you didn't.
Yeah.
So like we said in the beginning, these crimes just completely shocked and devastated the city of Knoxville. So these rapes and murders were so brutal, and this area had really never seen anything like this extreme before. I mean, Knoxville's not like a super small town, but I mean, it's small town enough that like stuff like this just doesn't happen there, you know?
Yeah, and like we've kind of had like an uptick in crime recently, but like around this time it was, in general, stranger crime is rare. So like this brutal of a stranger crime is like unheard of around here. Like usually when you hear stuff, it's like people who know each other, a kid killing their parents or killing their significant other, like stuff like that, where it's like absolutely horrible, but it's like you can kind of disassociate a little bit. But this is like, wow, this is random. This could be me. This could be anyone.
Yep. And many Knoxville residents also became upset that there was no hate crime charges. So because 5 black individuals attacked 2 white individuals, many believed that it was racially motivated. The state did argue that all evidence pointed to the fact that it was a random crime and that race had nothing to do with it. But a protest was organized by white supremacists and was held in Knoxville on May 28th of that year. And many people in the area do continue to have very strong feelings about the race factor in this case.
I think this is also a reason we haven't covered this crime for a while, especially around the time of George Floyd's death. A lot of people like to share this crime and be like, well, where's the outrage for this crime? And I do think people were outraged, and I think people wanted to make it like it was a racially motivated crime, but I think this was just 5 bad people who did something to 2 innocent people. And, they did identify and find the perpetrators, and they were, we'll talk about the trial here in a second. So I think that's a little bit of the difference, is like we are outraged and it is disgusting, and these 5 people should burn in hell for all of eternity, but I don't think it should have to do with their race. And we didn't really want to release an episode and people think that we're contributing to that. So we kind of just gave it a little bit of time before we covered and released it.
Yes. So, like Courtney said, we are going to get into the trials. So, the prosecution continued to build their case and announced in March of 2008 that they would seek the death penalty. And then on April 4th, 2008, a federal jury found Eric Boyd guilty of being an accessory after the fact, as well as failing to report the location of a known fugitive because he was aware of Davidson's location when he was like on the run before police questioned him. So by the time they got to Eric to ask him, he had known his location the whole time, and it was announced that police were searching for Davidson. So he knew that and was still hiding him. So Eric Boyd was sentenced to the maximum sentence of 18 years, and the other 4 defendants were scheduled to go to trial separately the following year. Then on October 10th, 2008, the home on Chipman Street was demolished and a memorial was erected there, which is good because, I mean, can you imagine someone living there after that? Like,
yeah, and morbid curiosity, I have driven by and seen the memorial, and it is just like, I don't know if it was maybe just like me or what, but you just get this feeling of just like heartbreak, like just looking and you're just like, oh my God, like I don't even know how to process these emotions. Like it's hard.
And during the trials, the crime scene photos were so graphic that some people in court actually fainted. Like, I mean, they're absolutely brutal. In the Sins and Secrets episode that Courtney mentioned in the beginning, they show actual police footage of when they searched the house. So you don't see Shannon's body, but you see them like opening the trash can and then it cuts out before you see anything. But just that actual footage was just so chilling and so hard to look at. Like, I literally cannot even imagine the actual crime scene photos.
Yeah, and I mean, we told you how brutal it was. Like, yeah, I can't imagine.
But Judge Richard Bumgardner was recorded saying that anyone who cried would be kicked out of the courtroom. Like, okay, I get you're trying to maintain, like, a calm, like, level-headed environment, but, I mean, I'm sure most people cannot control those emotions seeing something like that. Like, that's just absurd to me.
And especially when their parents were there having to see their children, like, you can cry and not be like screaming or anything. You know what I mean? Like crying is like very like silent. I mean, even like anyone, even if it's not your child, I feel like seeing this, if you're passing out, it's so bad. Like it would have that kind of reaction.
Yeah, like, I don't know if you know this, but you can't really make yourself faint unless you're, like, holding your breath or something. But, like, that's not a reaction that you can, like, fake, you know? And again, imagine being their family members and being told anyone that cries is going to get kicked out of this courtroom. Like, how could you not cry during this?
Yeah.
So then on August 25th, 2009, Latavis Cobbins was found guilty of first-degree felony murder for the murder of Channon and guilty of facilitating the murder of Christopher. He was found not guilty for raping Christopher, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And then, and this is, I mean, almost as bad as everything that we've already said as far as inducing rage, but during Lamarcus Davidson's trial, his defense attorney claimed that Channon and Christopher had willingly gone to Davidson's house on their own to purchase drugs. And he said that the signs of sexual assault and that DNA evidence were actually from Channon having consensual sex with them in exchange for drugs.
When we said she was violently raped, I mean, I read reports that there were blood vessels in her throat that were like busted and destroyed. That is not consensual sex. Never. It's not.
There is literally no way. There is literally no way. Like, aside from the fact that her family could be like, okay, she would never do this. Like, she has a boyfriend. She would not consent to sex in every whole possible, like, no. Like, I understand a defense attorney's job is to try to get their client acquitted, but how the hell do you sleep at night knowing that that's something that you tried to present? Like, how? How?
And then, like we said, defense attorney's job is to try and, you know, have a fair trial, whatever, I get it. But, like, this is just not even, like, plausible. Like, it's not even, like, an option. Like, look at how, like, much, like, violence, like, both of them endured. So it's like, okay, so the stuff on Shannon's body is from consensual sex. Okay, what about Christopher? What about what happened to him? How does this play into your whole consensual sex theory? Like, it doesn't. Like, it's all bullshit.
Yeah, exactly. But thankfully, on October 28th, 2009, Lamarcus Davidson was found guilty of 2 first-degree murder and 2 premeditated first-degree murder charges, as well as facilitation of aggravated rape. He did receive the death penalty. And in 2010, he also received a sentence of 80 years for additional charges related to these murders. Davidson is pretty unanimously seen as the ringleader of these heinous rapes and murders.
Mm-hmm.
So then on December 8th, 2009, George Thomas was found guilty of numerous counts of felony murder, including murder during robbery, murder during kidnapping, rape and murder, etc. So when we were researching this, we were kind of confused at first about how there were multiple murder charges, because, I mean, there were 2 individuals murdered. How are there more than 2 murder charges? But it's because they can tie in each of the additional crimes. So you can have, like I said, a murder committed during robbery, a murder committed during kidnapping, a murder after rape, so on.
Mm-hmm.
So Vanessa Coleman was granted immunity for testifying about the federal charges of carjacking, but the state courts ruled that the federal immunity would not apply to the state charges. So she thought she was going to get away with it, but this bitch didn't, don't worry. So she did not go to trial until 2010. So on May 13th of that year, she was found not guilty of murder, but was found guilty of facilitating the rapes and murders and was sentenced to 53 years in prison. Now, you wouldn't think that this whole ordeal could get any worse for these families. Like, they have been through literally the worst thing you could ever imagine, but it's about to get worse.
Yeah, you thought we were about to do perks of the week. You got to hold out for a little bit longer. We're not about to do perks of the week.
No, there's no perk yet. We've mentioned this before. In March of 2011, Knox County Criminal Court Judge Richard Bumgardner, who presided over these 4 trials, was forced to resign from the bench after it came to light that he was addicted to pain pills and had been purchasing them from criminals that he had convicted. He was also found to have traded legal favors for sex.
Yep.
clearly that's going to cause some issues because you had many conflicts of interest. You were not an impartial party. There are so many things wrong with this. So he was disbarred, and the county decided that he had been impaired during his last 2 years on the bench, so therefore any trials during that time had been compromised. So this meant that all of these defendants could now possibly receive new trials.
Yeah, so when we say this case is infamous, it's not just even for the case, it's for the after effect. And I mean, obviously these 5 perpetrators are very hated, but Richard Bumgarner may be like the most hated man in Knox County.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it affected a lot.
Yeah. So Judge John Carey Blackwood originally granted new trials to all 4 state defendants. And remember, at this time, Eric Boyd was only indicted on federal charges, not state charges, so that's why this doesn't apply to him. And prosecutors believed that Bumgarner was impaired during Coleman's trial, but they did appeal the decision to grant new trials to Davidson, Thomas, and Cobbins. So for some reason, I guess the timing, because hers occurred later, they were like, yeah, he was definitely impaired here, but we don't know if he was definitely impaired enough for the other 3 to redo those. So, and the only reason we give you all of the details of this timeline is just so you understand what these families went through of like all of this time of waiting and then decisions being switched back and forth and so on and so forth. So that's why there are so many details here. So the decision to hold retrials was upheld by the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals. Then a month later, this decision was overturned by the Tennessee Supreme Court because they stated that misconduct outside the courtroom does not necessarily mean the judge was impaired during every trial. So then the decision went back to Judge Blackwood, who again granted retrials. And then he was asked to recuse himself because prosecutors believed he was too emotionally invested in these cases. So, Senior Judge Walter Kurtz denied retrials for Cobbins and Davidson, but did grant them for Coleman and Thomas. So, again, we give you all those details so you can understand the length of time that this family is just waiting to get information about what's going to happen. So, on November 20th, 2012, Vanessa Coleman was found guilty of aggravated kidnapping, facilitation of rape, and facilitation of the murder of Channon. She was found not guilty for charges related to Christopher's murder, which she was previously found guilty for. So now she was sentenced to 35 years with credit for time served because they were lesser charges than her original trial. She did appeal this conviction, but it was denied. Then on May 17th, 2013, George Thomas was found guilty of the same charges as his first trial and was sentenced to life in prison again, but this time with the possibility of parole after 51 years. So he appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, but they did deny it. But in 2018, he secretly accepted a deal to testify against Eric Boyd for his role in the murders in exchange for a 50-year sentence instead of life. So, because of this, prosecutors were finally able to obtain an indictment against Eric Boyd 12 years after these murders occurred. So Boyd did just go to trial in 2019, finally, and was found guilty on all 20 counts of the indictment, including kidnapping, rape, and murder. So the guilty verdict, like we said, was based largely on George Thomas's testimony, and Boyd was sentenced to life in prison. He appealed on the grounds that little physical evidence linked him to the kidnapping, rapes, and murders, and his attorneys also stated that there should be a change of venue because he would not get a fair trial in Knox County due to the media coverage and the strong feelings about the case in the area. But the judge did deny all motions for a new trial.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see how he might not get a fair trial in Knox County because we all know everything.
Yeah.
But I also am like, you have so much evidence against you. I think even if the jury, like, didn't know anything about it, like, they would come to the same conclusion.
Yeah. Like, you're just trying everything you can, basically. Mm-hmm. So, the Shannon Gale Christian Foundation and the Shannon Gale Christian Memorial Golf Tournament raise money every year for a scholarship for a Farragut High School senior to attend the University of Tennessee. There is also an annual memorial baseball tournament held at the Halls Community Park to remember Christopher. And a scholarship in his name is provided to a graduating Halls High School baseball player every year as well. And a memorial service is also held at the location where the house was every year on the anniversary of their deaths. So the Channon Christian Act was signed into law in 2014 to prevent evidence of crimes, wrongs, or acts being used to prove the character of an individual, including a deceased victim, defendant, or witness. So this is in response to Channon and Christopher's alleged drug use that was brought up at trial. So basically they're like, you're not allowed to do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And also, the Chris Newsom Act was signed into law in 2014, and it allows a new judge on a case to act as a 13th juror when the jury's verdict is unanimous. So, after Judge Walter Kurtz took over from the now disbarred Judge Richard Bumgardner, he granted George Thomas a new trial because he said he couldn't serve as the 13th juror because he had not been present for the original testimony. So, basically, prior to the Chris Newsom Act, a judge always had to serve as the 13th juror, meaning that they would have to sign off on the jury's decision to confirm it. So I had to look into that because I was like, I don't understand what this means at all. So basically, even if the jury had a unanimous decision, the judge had to, approve it.
Be like, okay, here's me, approving this officially.
Yeah, so the new judge basically said that he couldn't do that because he wasn't there for it, which is what allowed him to get a new trial. So this law prevents something like that from happening again. Basically eliminates the need for the judge to have to sign off on a jury's unanimous decision. So while this case completely shook Knoxville, it's not really discussed or talked about nationally or in the true crime community. Like we said, there's not really any podcast out there. I could only find the one Sins and Secrets episode. There's not, a lot of big documentaries or anything like that. In 2012, when the defendants were granted new trials, there was a Change.org article trying to petition the big news stations like CNN, Fox News, etc. to cover the story because it isn't really covered nationally.
Yeah.
And even today, we don't really feel like a lot of people outside of Knoxville are aware of this story or have ever heard of it, especially just with the extreme brutality. Usually these are ones that get some big media coverage. We talked about it briefly before. A lot of people say that it does not get media coverage because it was 5 black individuals committing a crime against 2 white individuals. A lot of people say that that's why it didn't receive national attention. I don't really know why it didn't receive national attention. It absolutely should have. It should be something that everyone is aware of, just like any other major crime that would be covered so heavily.
Yeah, and it definitely, I don't mean to sound harsh, but this sounds like something that would get national news, where it's random, 2 people carjacked, this happens, all of this unfolds, there's a new trial because the judge was on drugs, you have everything in this story, how, does it not get national news? And I've seen some videos of people being it was completely horrific for Knoxville, but sometimes these things just kind of happen everywhere, but it doesn't really feel like that to this degree, of everything that happened. So yeah, a lot of people who I talk to who aren't from Knoxville or Tennessee, have never heard of this, but like I said, every person that I know in Knoxville, anytime I'm yeah, I have a podcast, they're like, you should do this case. You should cover this case. You should do it. So we're doing it. We did it. It was hard. It's really, really heartbreaking. And it's just, Shannon's dad is very active, on social media and has a lot of stuff like that. And tries to always talk about her and remember her. And videos of him during the trial just break my heart because you can just, of all 4 parents, you can just see in their faces how destroyed they are. And he would just rock back and forth during it, probably just trying to hold it together. I don't even know how you would. So heartbreaking.
Yeah, especially I saw one piece of trial footage when Davidson's attorney was trying to claim that the sex was consensual, and like you said, he's rocking back and forth. You can see this vein in his head that looks like it's literally just about to explode, and I'm I have no idea how you were able to keep that in. And I believe all 4 parents were at every single trial, motion, retrial. Like we said, it was a lot, and I'm pretty sure all of them went to every single one because they're no, we're going to make sure that there is justice for my child.
Yeah, and it is heartbreaking, and we hope we covered it well. We did want to address kind of why we've put it off and kind of the whole conversation of like people sharing it, you know, especially in light of like the whole like George Floyd's murder, and that we don't want to say like this is like a lesser case or anything like that. It's absolutely horrific, but that is why we believe, you know, there weren't necessarily like, I mean, there were protests, unfortunately by white supremacists, but you know, why it's not necessarily to the same level as that. And, you know, it is because George Floyd's murder, it took a few months to get him arrested. And this does happen, especially when people in a position of authority use it, you know, poorly. And that's kind of why that happened, where, you know, this is a little bit different. It does not make one more horrific than the other. I mean, we don't compare crimes around here. That's not what we do.
No, never.
So we just kind of wanted to address that and like talk about it, because I think we can't cover this episode and not talk about it, basically.
Yeah, because that is a huge part of the lingering remembrance of these cases. And both of us, I think, agree 100% that it should have received more media attention than it did. Like, absolutely.
Yeah, because it's horrific. And I'm saying those 5 people are scum of the earth, should burn in hell. Like, absolutely horrific what you did to another human being. Like, horrible.
And I know this is one that, you know, always stuck with us because, you know, Courtney and I were teenagers when this happened. So then as we're getting older and driving on our own and stuff like that, like, I know this is something that my mom brought up many times of, you know, when you like get in the car to go where you're going, you get in the car and you go. You don't hang out. You don't leave your doors unlocked and just do whatever, or even, you know, which areas you should and should not be in at night. Like, this obviously stuck in her head and our heads and always will, you know.
Yeah, I think about that all the time, you know, like, and I think it could just be the difference between being a woman and being a man, but like, Kevin, you know, will get in the car and he'll like fiddle on his phone, do this, and I'm like, no, like, we get in the car, you start the car, you go. You get home, you get out, you lock all your doors, like, when I come up to my car, I'm like looking in the back seat. I look all around. I make sure nothing looks off with my car before I get in it. Like, just some of those things that, I mean, I am more into true crime than Kevin, so I think about it. But I think it is also kind of like, as a woman, you're always trying to be aware of your surroundings, like what's going to happen. And this case was one of those that like sticks in your mind of you could just be somewhere, you know, and randomly something like that can happen.
And it doesn't matter if you are a woman alone or if you are with another person or a male or anything, because Shannon may have had this false sense of security because it's like, oh, I have my boyfriend with me. Like, I mean, I know there are plenty of times where I feel more safe when Andrew's with me versus not, but it's like something like this could still happen, you know? So it's like, just like, and you hate to always be on the edge that something like this could happen because we understand it is extremely, extremely rare. But there are always precautions that you can take to, you know, attempt to protect yourself as much as possible.
I try to find that healthy balance of like cautious, you know, where I'm not too much, but I'm also aware.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's what it is. You know, it's just, and I mean, they were doing nothing wrong. They were just talking before getting in the car, and like, it's just absolutely tragic.
Definitely. So now that we've covered this absolutely horrific case, Courtney, what is your perk of the week?
Now that your day's ruined, you can hear us try to talk about something lighter. So my perk of the week is, you know, we've all been thinking about once we're vaccinated, what we're going to do. And I've been ready to go to a concert. And I literally told Kevin there was like one concert I really wanted to go to, like whenever, you know, we could and it was safe. And I think I mentioned her few episodes ago. God knows how long ago it was. Her name's Phoebe Bridgers. I've been obsessed with her for the past few months. Like, Kevin's probably sick of me, like, obsessing over Phoebe Bridgers, but I got tickets to see her, and I am so excited because it was the longest hour of my life, because I'm just gonna, you know what, we need something happy. I'm just gonna divulge what happened. So
I gave you a long unnecessary story at the beginning. Courtney's gonna give you a long unnecessary story at the end. You're welcome. That's what you're here for, right?
You are welcome. Yeah, so basically, I think in an attempt to prevent scalpers, Ticketmaster tries to do it where you have to be like a verified fan. So you have to like register and you put in your email and you say like you want to go, which concert you want to go to. And what they'll do is they will send you a link and a code for the for the on sale. So that way it's trying to be like, you can't just like get on with everyone else and buy tickets. Like, it tries to eliminate scalpers the best it can. Not great, because they're already selling the tickets triple for what I paid. So,
Yeah.
But I got the code. I was ready. It was 12 on Friday. I enter my code and it says invalid code. And I was like, what do you mean invalid? This is what they sent me. This is what they sent me.
Courtney's
Kevin's
eyes twitching. She's like, no, this is the code. This is the code.
I tried it. Lowercase, uppercase. I tried it every way. I was like, I had Kevin trying. We were all trying to get in. I'm on Twitter. Everyone else is having the same issue. Almost everything I see. There's only like 1 or 2 people who are like, oh, I got in. I got tickets. Everyone else is like, Ticketmaster, my code's not working. What the fuck is happening? What? Okay, so you couldn't get a hold of Ticketmaster. You called and they said email. You couldn't find an email anywhere on their site. It was through Eventbrite. Eventbrite sent you and said, contact the organizer. The organizer told me to reach out to Ticketmaster. So I was like, okay. So
I'm never going to get to this damn concert.
So I was just upset and I was like, I don't know. I guess I'm just not going. I guess it wasn't meant to be. And then I just kept refreshing and suddenly, I don't know if my code worked. I don't know if they just opened it up because so many people were reaching out and freaking out. But somehow I got 2 tickets and I'm just so happy. So I'm going and I'm going to probably cry and I'm just so excited to do something that I haven't done in years because of the pandemic, and hopefully everyone there will also be vaccinated. I can't imagine many Phoebe Bridgers fans wouldn't be vaccinated, but you never know. So hopefully it'll be a good time. There was my little spiel, and that's my perk of the week.
That is a really good perk of the week. I have tickets to my first post-COVID concert in October. Tiffany and I are going to go see All Time Low, which Courtney rudely declined because she doesn't want to hang out with her best friends because, okay, whatever. But I'm super excited.
I'll hang out with y'all doing what? I agreed to do a half marathon with you guys, but I'm sorry. All Time Low is just not my thing. I'm sorry. It's just not.
Courtney and I share many, many interests, and music is not one of them. So,
yeah, it was a phase for me. I'm sorry. I completely respect people that it wasn't a phase, that you're an elder emo. I respect you. Can't do it. I'm sorry.
You know, it's all good. It's all good. My photographer, who I gave a shout out to a couple of episodes, a few episodes ago. Anyway, she's the one that told me about it because we had conversations during our maternity and then newborn shoots about it. So she's going to be there as well. So we're going to get to hang out with her and it's going to be great. And, you know, it's fine. I'm not going to miss Courtney at all. I'm not bitter about it. It's totally cool. It's not like I want to see her every chance I can. It's fine.
I'm just saying, you and Tiffany need your bonding time. You know, I can't be intruding all the time. Okay. Anyway, okay, so Jaclyn, what is your perk of the week?
So, my perk of the week, it's a very small but significant perk of the week. So, Andrew's been getting this ice cream, and it's Bluebell's Blackberry Cobbler, and it's just delicious.
That sounds good.
Usually, I'm more of like I want chocolate in my ice cream. Like, it doesn't have to be like all chocolate, but, you know, some kind of like chocolate or some swirl, some chocolate pieces, you know, whatever. But this one, it's like a vanilla ice cream, and then it has like a blackberry swirl, but it has like pieces of like the cobbler, like breading, I guess. You know, like it's like a chunky, like cakey. Anyway, it's just super good, and I told Andrew not to get any more Ben & Jerry's because I'm trying to lose the last of this baby weight. I don't need this Ben & Jerry's. But then a week later, I was like, get some ice cream when you go to the store because I love some ice cream. And he got that one. So I'm like, okay, we'll just keep these extra 8 pounds. It's fine. It's totally fine. Totally worth the ice cream.
Yeah, Blackberry Cobbler is one of my favorite desserts. Like, my mom makes this blackberry cobbler, and like, my favorite thing is she'll like make it and pull it out of the oven, and it's like hot, and she'll put it in a bowl, and she'll put vanilla ice cream on it. And like,
yep,
probably one of my favorite ever desserts if I had to. So delicious, so amazing. I love blackberry cobbler.
Yes, blackberry cobbler is so good, and I bet you would love this ice cream as well. So definitely check it out.
I'm gonna have to keep an eye out for it. I'll have to. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should just live in ignorance and not get it. But if you want to tell us about your favorite ice cream, your first post-vaccination concert, I don't know, anything in your day, anything you want to talk to us about, your thoughts on the case, your thoughts on how we covered it, whatever, you can do so at Caffeinated Crimes on Instagram. Wait, it's Caffeinated Crimes Pod on Instagram. You know what, guys? We're just rolling with the punches here.
It's all good.
Caffeinated Crimes Podcast on Facebook. CAF Crimes Pod on Twitter. That's CAFF Crimes Pod. You can send us an email at caffeinatedcrimespod@gmail.com, or if you feel so inclined, you can donate a little extra money. We just put on Instagram in our highlights reel all of the current bonus episodes that are available, and I'm going to try to keep adding to that. So if you're listening to this somehow 2 years later, you'll still see all of the bonus episodes we have. We have a Discord. We have monthly hangouts where we get on like a kind of like a Zoom, and we all just sit and talk for like 30 minutes. And then we have, Q&As. We have, I don't know, what else? We have pin and stickers at certain levels, gifts every quarter. I don't know, a lot of other stuff. So you can do that at patreon.com/caffeinatedcrimes.
And if you want a chance to get a pin and sticker without joining the Patreon, you can go to Apple Podcast Reviews, leave us a review. 5 stars is great. If you leave us a 1 star, I'm sorry, we're probably not going to put you in the contest, just FYI. But definitely let us know that you did so we can make sure and include you. And once we reach 50 of those, we will draw someone to win a Caffeinated Crimes pin, sticker, and a gift card to a coffee shop of your choice. So make sure you do that. If you guys need help doing that, let us know. If you don't know how to do so, unfortunately, it's only for iPhone users. I wish there was a way for other platforms to have something similar, but I mean, there isn't really. But obviously the downloads help every time, so as long as you guys are subscribed and continuing to download, that is super helpful. And if you have an iPhone, that review makes a big difference. So yeah, make sure you head on over and do all of those things.
Yeah, those reviews help us get possibly onto various charts or get more recognized, all that. Five is good, 1 is bad, just in case for some reason. I've heard other podcasts talk about people leaving 1 stars, but then putting like a glamorous like written review. So they're like, don't forget, 5 out of 5 is good. It's what we want. So yeah, please go do that. But in the meantime, go have a cup of coffee.
And don't commit a crime.